This is what a Commodore 64 is supposed to look like. It's an iconic piece of 80s design with its chunky curved edges and simple but functional styling. But this is what my Commodore 64 looks like. It looks like it's survived the apocalypse scene at the start of the Terminator film. Every nook and cranny is caked in 30 years of dirt, grime and teenager DNA. And whilst in recent years this machine has clearly been neglected, the presence of the very 80s stickers makes me think that at some point this machine was loved. And I can imagine a kid in the 80s rushing home from school, grabbing a packet of Space Invaders from the local newsagents and then firing up their favourite game. Now, when I was a kid, I didn't rush home to fire up a Commodore 64 because I had an Atari 8-bit, a 65XE to be exact. And whilst I loved that machine and have many happy memories, I'd often feel like I was missing out on the latest and greatest games. I'd sit flicking through the latest issue of CMVG and see games like Target Renegade, The Last Ninja and Rainbow Islands and wish I could play them. So here we are 30 years later, in the midst of a pandemic, and I finally own my very first Commodore 64. But there's just one problem. I don't actually know if this machine works. I picked it up on eBay. It was listed as untested and didn't include a power supply or any leads. It did, however, include this equally manky tape deck, so we can at least try and get some games to load. Okay, so moving back indoors, let's see what happens when we try and fire up this little machine. Now, I know some of you are probably screaming that I should be using a CRT, and don't get me wrong, I love CRTs. In fact, I've got a Sony CRT that I'd normally use for this purpose. But this little Samsung LCD is great for testing. It's perfect for retro computers and consoles. It's got a good mix of analog and digital inputs, including S-Video, SCART, Component, DVI, VGA, and Composite. I'm using a brand new S-Video lead. I'm also going to be using a brand new power block. Now, I've heard that the original Commodore 64 power supplies aren't particularly reliable, especially after 30 years, so I've decided not to take any chances at all with this, and I've just picked up a brand new unit. And with that said, let's see what happens when we power it on. And would you believe it fired up first time. I was really chuffed at this stage. I'd heard that these C64s are rugged little machines, but I genuinely had no idea if it was actually going to work. But it does. So next up, let's see if we can load a game. And here's where we run into our first problem. You can see me here pressing the shift and run stop buttons but getting no response. I really had to press them down hard to get them to work, so this is definitely something we'll have to come back and fix.
One eternity later.
And the game loaded straight up as well. And of course, it's one of those games I wanted to play as a kid but couldn't play on my Atari. Renegade, a great game, but what's with the control system? You're probably wondering why I'm not punching anyone. That's because you use the joystick to move your character around, but kick and punch using the keyboard, so it's virtually impossible to play unless you've got a joystick that sticks to the table. As a kid, I remember having a QuickShot 2 Turbo. That would have been great for this game, and it sounds great as well. QuickShot 2 Turbo. And of course, back in the 80s, companies seemed to put turbo stickers on everything. Turbos were cool, so you didn't just have a kettle, you had a Boil Master Turbo. But enough playing around, it's time we started trying to remove 30 years of greasy Monster Munch fingerprints, wet look gel flakes and wagon wheel crumbs. Cue the cleaning montage. So at this stage we've taken off a lot of the grime, but the tricky bit is going to be the stickers. Some of them are welded on. It's time to break out the hairdryer, something I haven't needed to do for my hair for about 20 years. You'll also know that I'm using the most powerful sticker removal tool ever devised, the mighty fingernail. Okay, so after round 1 of cleaning, this machine's already starting to look a lot better. Strangely, without the stickers, it looks a bit naked, but it's definitely an improvement on what it was originally. And we can also start to see the original colour now that we've removed the stickers. I'm hoping that with a bit more scrubbing and some elbow grease, we can get our Commodore 64 clean enough so that we don't need to retro bright it. I'm not anti-retro brighting, but if the colour is only slightly out, I'm hoping we can get away with some brighting instead. But at this stage, I decided that our Commodore 64 needs a bath, just so that we can really get into all of those nooks and crannies. But before we do that, we'll need to strip it down. Luckily, that's a very simple process. Just a few screws and a couple of cables. And I love finding bits like this inside an old computer. A big shout out to Tracy and Sue Meek. I can imagine them chatting about Michael Jackson's latest song and last night's EastEnders whilst putting together our Commodore 64. Okay, and just before we go back outside to give this thing another clean, I thought we'd just take a closer look at the keyboard, just to get an idea of just how manky this thing is. I hope these shots really do demonstrate just how much filth and grime is inside this machine. If I ever wanted to clone an 80s teenager, I'd have plenty of source material, that's for sure. Moving back outside, it's a beautiful day in sunny England. In fact, I think the weather is the only thing that's kept me sane during the COVID-19 lockdown. Well, that and beer. Lots of beer. In this shot, you can see that I've removed the power LED. It's glued in, but isn't too difficult to remove. And for this stage of the cleaning process, we're going to be enlisting the help of a retro cleaning specialist, Derek the Dolphin. He's got nice soft bristles so won't damage any surfaces. He's also a big fan of Tottenham Hotspur, he loves Airwolf, and he doesn't understand why they stopped making Baywatch. Okay, so our Commodore 64 is really starting to look good at this stage. It's hard to believe this is the same manky sticker covered machine that we had at the start of this video. And just moving around to the bottom of this machine, it's definitely better, but there's still one or two scuffs that we'll need to remove. You can see one scuff over there to the left. There's another one here right near the Commodore sticker, and another one here on the very bottom corner. And to remove these, we're going to be using some baking powder. Now it's very important to get the baking powder for fluffy muffins, not standard muffins, that won't do. Fluffy is always better. Okay, and I think that's where we'll leave this first video. Our Commodore 64 is well on its way to being back to its former glory. There's a very slight colour difference between where we removed the stickers and the rest of the machine, but nothing major, so I think we'll leave it basking in the sun for a few days to even out its tan. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I'm new to YouTube and I've got absolutely no experience at all making videos. In fact, it took me longer to actually figure out how to use the software to make this video than it did to actually pull the Commodore 64 apart. But I thought I'd try and share my COVID lockdown project in the hope that there are other like-minded people out there. I'll be back in part 2 where we'll sort out the keyboard and get this machine back together. For now, I'll leave you with a few more clips of our Commodore 64.